Debt is a tool. And when that email hits my inbox, it's not just a charge, it's a warning. Vengeance has finally arrived after roughly, god damn, I'm just thinking about it right now, 2 years. I want to say roughly about 2 years since I pre-ordered this guy on Sideshow.com. Right on the onset of the release of the Batman, we finally have the Robert Pattinson Batman from Hot Toys. And since then, there's been some rehauls of the sculpt, there's been some updates. Hot Toys released some statements saying that they were working on some things to make sure that everything was up to par. And so now it's under my possession. I knew that this was a Hot Toys I definitively wanted to get, but this took such a while to get released that since then, a certain competitor to Hot Toys has not only made a bit of a name for themselves as far as what they can bring to the 1/6 scale market, but they've also revealed that they got their own Robert Pattinson Batman on the way. So in the interim, we're going to be taking a look at the Hot Toys and really determine if this guy is truly worth getting in the aftermarket, considering that he's practically sold out through an awful lot of the major retailers, unless you can find him at a really good price in the aftermarket or overseas, and trying to figure out if there's enough happening here with the set, or, as the old saying goes, should you wait for in-art? And Hot Toys is in a very specific position as far as being able to nail the accuracy, because obviously they're not the same company as they were roughly about 10 years ago, where certain things were probably a little lacking as far as likeness, as far as accuracy to the suit. And you could see that one of the things that they really wanted to get right was the representation of the suit here from the 2022 Matt Reeves movie, where you can tell that this is year 2 Batman, and so the suit is going to be made very makeshift as far as something that actually feels like I don't want to say a teenager, but a very young man, somewhere in his 20s or 30s, has only been Batman for roughly about 2 years, and he's made the suit himself. Lucius Fox is not under his employ, so that's one of the things that kind of drew a lot of inspiration to the suit. And I know that there's some people that are kind of on the fence as far as the suit. For the majority of the populace that loves Batman and went and checked out that movie, they love this suit. They really do like this interpretation. They probably have preferences as far as maybe the Kilmer suit, the Clooney suit, the Bale suit, who knows, even Keaton. But as far as something that feels like its own, it's difficult to argue that this is definitely a very, very unique suit as far as having its own identity. And pulling him out of the box, Hot Toys, I want to say about 95% was able to nail that likeness, especially with this kind of grayish, not full on black, because I know that the different forms of the figure for this guy, whether it be from different manufacturers, often lean towards either a jet black or just straight up black kind of paint finish to their figure. But once we blow it up to the 1/6 scale format, I can tell that they definitely went for this very, very weathered, very grayed out and worn out fabric that actually looks like it's been through the mud, it's been through the dirt, and he's not necessarily upkeeping it or at least putting it through dry cleaning. Most of which is very apparent throughout the mid-torso and thigh area. That's probably where you get most of this really weathering, dirtied up kind of look. And it's authentic. I know it may not really rub everybody the right way, specifically if they want it for a much more very brand new suit, but again, this is year 2 Batman. He hasn't necessarily nailed down the suit. I'm fully expecting there to be a updated version of V2 or a 2.0 when we get to Batman Part 2. But for the time being, I love that they were able to nail, for the most part, the fabric and the padding, specifically around the abdominal and thigh area. You can actually feel the individual pads stitched together with this kind of, like I said, very clothy kind of feel and texture on top, especially with the knee pads. Again, the padding that's happening around the thigh area, the crotch area, and specifically these separated panels on the abdomen. I think they really stick out to me. And then, of course, you know that you pretty much have I don't want to say a home run, but you come very damn close when you're able to nail the shoulder and chest area, specifically where you have the symbol. It's in my opinion, a huge checkbox that Hot Toys needs to nail every time they produce a Batman figure. And I feel like for the most part, they were able to nail it for this specific Robert Pattinson interpretation, because you can see that you have this kind of metallic look to the bat symbol along with the little orange accents to make it look very alive, but you still have a little bit of weathering happening around the wing area, and then more of that kind of dirt finish around the actual panels of the armor. Except you don't really have too much of that fabric material happening on that chest piece. You can see it has a much more, I don't know what to call it, but texturized kind of feel separated that from that of the abdomen. And again, it looks very screen accurate. Then you have a much more smoother, semi-glossy, semi-satin look to the bicep armor, the shoulder armor that looks, like I said, very makeshift, kind of put together from like some motorcycle parts. And that still manages to translate over to the gauntlets. Of course, that's another very identifiable portion of the Robert Pattinson suit. It's going to be these gauntlets with the little spikes here that are in this chrome finish. Not as weathered as I would have liked it to be to kind of keep the uniformity in hand, but at least the gauntlets and the little spikes here that are made out of these straps are still intact. You have, of course, the hands right there. I, for posterity, went ahead and threw on the fisted hands. They don't come on by default out of the box, but I figured he will look a little bit more intimidating and suitable in that stance. But more on that when we get to accessories. So overall, the suit itself, you can see right here that for the most part, they nailed it. If there was any complaints I would have is that when you get kind of towards the leg area, you have, of course, so much of the utility stuff, the belt, the straps right here that a little bit can feel a little, I don't want to say loose, but fidgeting with the figure, you can see that some things may come a little bit off kilter to the side where you have to do a little bit of finagling to get him back into a uniformal place. So you have the holster right here on the side that's going to come in handy later on, but when you fidget it slightly, you can see right here that it starts to rotate horizontally across the thigh. And to me, the biggest culprits of this happening would have to be the gauntlets. They're a little bit on the loose side, that in order to kind of get them in the much more straightforward area to be facing forward like this, you're going to have to practically do it every single time that you do move the arms. So that's just a word of caution there. And I feel like it's a very uniformal thing for practically every Batman figure. Almost every Batman Hot Toys figure, the gauntlets are loose for obvious reasons to make things a little bit more convenient, but more often than not, they end up getting a little too raised up or too lowered down. So you have to mess around with them a little bit to make sure that they're in their proper place. Same thing for the technology, quote unquote, used around the boot area. You'll notice that they went with this much more leatherized texture look that looks really good as far as visual aid. And I love the dirt around the boots. Of course, the sculpting, the paint applications, very Hot Toys level. But when you do kind of even handle him by the leg area, you'll notice that this shin area gets separated from the rest of the boot, of course, for the sake of functionality. But sometimes it does cause me to feel like like the figure's kind of slipping through my fingers, you know what I'm saying? So it's just something to kind of keep in mind. But at least when you do kind of navigate around this area and move the cape out of the way, you'll notice that you have much more extra little intricacies happening with the stitching. Specifically, this kind of like zigzaggy textured look to the side of the suit itself that, again, feels very makeshift, but speaks to the character, and it's rather accurate because that's exactly how he had it in the movie. So it's cool that you can still see a little bit of that on the sides of the legs, more profoundly here on the side of the left leg, and then the abdomen as well, and towards the back. You even have some additional zipperage happening here towards the back that still looks very cool. An awful lot of different textures and fabrics, and even color tones, you could say, colorways happening alongside right here, but it still feels very uniform and nothing really out of place. Still decorated with an awful lot of those little orange accents that are screen accurate, with some dashes of chrome and even metallic black that still makes everything look pretty alive. So for a Hot Toys figure, it's still pretty premium. There might be like one or two things here and there that may not float everybody's boat, whether it be because of screen accuracy. And I guess while we're on that note, that's probably a good segue into my personal one, which is going to be the cape. Because here's where I come into a bit of a conundrum with myself, because I understand that for the most part, this is frankly how the cape did look in fact in the movie. A lot of people even criticized it from a design level when the suit was first revealed for the movie, for Pattinson himself to wear, that the cape did kind of have this, for lack of a better term, trash baggy sort of look. And a testament to Hot Toys, they went for screen accuracy to the point where it still looks a little trash baggy. And again, speaking to the weathering to make sure that the suit looks like it's been used, it hasn't really been cleaned fairly well because he's been so busy trying to become a nocturnal animal, that the cape down here towards the bottom has this dirtied up kind of effect. And again, it's intentional. You can definitely tell that this is meant to be a design choice. I personally don't like it though. I don't know. It's a subjective thing. It depends on the person, but for me personally, I would have liked something that's just a bit more straightforward black to at least compensate for the trash baggy feel. Here, adding the dirt just makes it look more trash baggy, even if it is screen accurate. But nevertheless, drapes over here towards the back. In the middle, you do have one wire for shaping, but then you have two additional wires, one on each side of the outside trimming here to kind of have it either hug up against the figure around the shoulder area, or if you wanted to kind of bend it in a specific direction to make it look like it's blowing in the wind, you could do so as well. And of course, you're going to have the natural kind of wavy Batman trademark trimming towards the bottom side right here to make it look iconic. So overall, you can see right here that the cape, it does the job, but to me, the piece de resistance that kind of makes and breaks virtually every Hot Toys ever in existence is going to be the likeness. And just like the suit itself, I want to say somewhere around the 90 to 95% bracket, they nailed that Robert Pattinson. You got the stare, you got the chin, you got a little bit of the stubble, and a little bit of the puffiness around the cheeks, and even a little bit of that dimple on the chin. Not as profound, so to speak, as Batfleck's, but it is in fact there. Can it be a little better? I'd argue yes. I would say here in person, I still would want to say that it could have been just a little bit more chiseled, just a little bit more wincy, if that makes any kind of sense as far as this neutral position. But for what you're getting at the value that you're paying for, I would say this is a very clean likeness as far as Robert Pattinson. Then going back to what I was mentioning for the remainder of the suit, going for that weathered effect, you have the cowl, which again, 90 to 95% they nailed as far as that aesthetical look, as far as the weathering, the chippings, the little gashes you see across, along with the little stitchings to kind of make it look like he put it together himself, and even the overall sculpture and how it actually looks to that of it on screen. So far, for me, 1-to-1 nailed. I subjectively, however, not a huge fan of the little dirty kind of lining happening in between each panel. But again, I know that that's me personal. That's not necessarily a huge harp on Hot Toys themselves, but overall, I would say that it's pretty much 1-to-1. I just wish we could have cleaned out a little bit of that dirtiness because it kind of reminds me of my own 3D printed cowl and how dirtied I made that thing look unintentionally because that was just not so much part of the plan. So despite my own personal nitpicks that I know are very subjective and they're not really going to speak to every single person as far as the weathering and the things that I would have kind of changed here or there, I still stand with what I said as far as that percentage. 90 to 95%, I want to say that this is probably your best bet right now for a really great shelf presence of a Robert Pattinson Batman figure. Overall likeness, having that imposing kind of look to him just standing there with the fists and the scowl in mind, he pretty much nails it. But another thing that Hot Toys is sometimes kind of in a very 50-50 divided stance would have to be posability, because more often than not, it really depends on the character. There's some characters that they go for that accuracy, but it lacks articulation, and then there's others where they go for that articulation, but then you end up with separated joints, ruining the immersion, ruining the masterpiece feel. Where does Batman exactly lie in that regard? Well, I would actually argue not too bad. I would even say that he's most surprising around the limb area, which I guess would make sense for a much more lanky, physiqued Batman like Robert Pattinson. I even made the argument to people close to me as far as cosplays. Like, they would always ask me, you always cosplay or always want to wear suits for like Spider-Man? Would you ever be a Batman? And I would always say that the two, because of my physique, the two that I can probably go for is either Terry McGinnis, Batman Beyond, and then Robert Pattinson now, because they're the two who I feel I can probably, as close as possible, resemble their physique. Everybody else is way too bulked up, specifically Ben Affleck, it's a near impossibility. But with Robert Pattinson, because of the lankier physique, you can argue that he could be a little bit more on the nimble side when it comes to him grappling, when it comes to him posing, being able to do certain stuff. So when it comes to that articulation, I would say the most surprising areas would have to be the limbs. Around the arm area, you can see right here that once you get a little bit of the shoulder armor moved out of the way, he can extend towards the sides and then even rotate towards the front. Of course, with every Hot Toys figure, you always have to be careful with the stitching of the suit itself because they always go for that accuracy. So you got to make sure that you're not doing any form of wearing or tearing on the suit itself, especially over time, if you keep some of those poses in mind. But I would say I was expecting a little bit more restriction happening here around the shoulder area. So being able to extend as far as I want to say about that far before I start to get a little bit of resistance from that suit is pretty surprising. I mean, I still think it could be better, but I was full on expecting a little bit worse. So to be able to extend it towards the back about that far as well, I'm like, all right, that's not terrible. That's not too bad. And you already saw a little bit of the extension. You can even rotate a little bit in the bicep area. I definitely can say not 360, but I want to say as far back as about getting to that area right about right there. And then you technically do have two joints in the elbow, but because of the gauntlets and the bicep armor and everything that's happening right there, it pretty much stops, I guess you could argue, the 90-degree angle. So that's pretty much what you're left with right about right there. Batman or no Batman, you still have the ball joints at the wrist that are fully able to rotate 360 and incline and bend inwards and outwards via the little cut or the vertical, horizontal cut that you can actually incline inwards and outwards. Just be careful with that peg, of course, because ever so often, depending on which hand you have on, it can come off a little easily. So just make sure it's fastened and secured in place. And then the legs are also they're a little bit more on the restricted side versus those of the arms, but they still move a bit more surprising than I would have given them credit for, specifically going forwards about, again, not great, but I was expecting worse. So being able to get to at least about that level right there before you start to get a little bit of pull from behind on the stitching on the back of the ass area right there where this fabric starts to stretch, you get about that far right there. Then extending towards the back, you could see you get just a little bit right there before all this starts to, of course, naturally pull. But then extending towards the sides, you get about that far. I want to say just shy of the 45-degree angle before you start to feel a little bit of pull in the crotch area right about right there. You can definitely feel a little bit of a thigh swivel, but because of everything happening with the suit, you can only really incline it so far right there to just kind of get a little bit of leeway on certain poses, so do be careful there. The knees are actually a little bit more on the surprising side because despite the padding and the extra little bit of fabric happening right here, they're actually ratcheted. So when you bend, you have one joint that is a little bit on the stiffer side, but then you can go even a little further on a slightly looser but still ratcheted joint. So you have two working in tandem there, and you can actually bend the knees almost up to that part right there. So I gotta be honest, this is even more surprising and even better than I was fully on expecting. And I honestly don't think you can even have gone even further than that. So kudos to Hot Toys to being able to deliver really malleable knees on a Batman figure. That's actually pretty surprising and astonishing. And the same could almost be said about the ankles, because even though I was kind of nitpicking the looseness of the shin piece earlier, the articulation on the ankles is actually pretty favorable. You can kind of nudge it up and down, but it can kind of incline and bend inwards and outwards without ever feeling like it's compromising or flexing the joint to the point of breaking, and can even kind of swivel side to side. I don't believe it can do the full 360. I don't want to risk it, but it's almost a full 180-degree angle on each foot. So you can see right there you have a little bit of flexing happening right there to make sure that you're pretty secure and balanced despite whichever pose you put him in, whether he's grappling, whether it looks like he's about to fight. It definitely looks like he's going to have some sure footing to deliver that killing stroke. That's a Batman Begins reference right there. And trust me, out of everything going on with the figure, these are the points of articulation you would rather have be the most bendable, the most posable, and the most secure as far as giving you those variances, giving you those options to be able to flex them in different forms of ways, specifically on a Hot Toys figure whenever they go for that accuracy on the suit. it's almost enough to make me forgive the complete lack of articulation on the torso, versus some other recent Hot Toys that I've covered, like the Spider-Man, the recently released Marvel Spider-Man 2, Miles and Peter, which did have some pretty flexible torso articulation with the double hinges on the waist and the mid-torso cut. Batman, unfortunately, here has practically nothing because of the way that all this padding right here is pretty much stagnated and stitched together to pretty much hug the entirety of this mold. There's virtually no articulation. You have a little bit of padding and it kind of feels like there's something in there, and you can see that you can kind of nudge the waist in different directions, whether it be turning left to right or kind of inclining it. I don't even want to say crunch. It's more so like an incline, forward and back, you can see right there. But in terms of actual flexibility, there's nothing really happening right there, and I don't want to force it because of how well everything right here is padded out, that it's practically frozen here in the middle portion right here. So don't flex it too badly, but it does look like he's completely stagnated right here, so that is a bummer. Now, when it comes to the head, you do have articulation, but here's where we get into a legitimate complaint that, once again, could be on the subjective side, that it could almost be categorized as a form of a hot take. The hot take is that I kind of hate these magnetized neck pieces. I'm sorry, I kind of hate them. I personally would have taken the traditional ball joint that has the head secured in place and gives me the traditional dumbbell articulation you'd expect of being able to turn 360, kind of incline it and tilt it up and down, left and right, yada yada yada. Here, I understand the intention to be able to give you pretty much full posability, to literally put it in any kind of degree of tilt and inclination and turning, etc., etc. But I don't know if it's just mine or if it's a widespread issue, but the magnets put in place inside of the neck piece and the head itself, they might have been assembled a little askew or off-put, that whenever I've handled the figure with him wearing the masked head, there's just something really wonky about it, that every time I hold him or kind of move him about, or I kind of tilt it in a certain direction, gravity pulls a little bit too much on the magnet, and his head always goes into like this direction. It always looks like that, and I have to finagle it in a way that is just frustrating. Right now, it's doing a pretty good job of kind of inclining down like so, and to kind of flush it up against the collar piece. But whenever I'm just kind of messing around with the hands or doing anything like that, the head always goes blah, like that, and it just looks like this. And I have to put it back in place, and then it goes like that. It's very, very, very sensitive, and personally, I just always hated these things. And I know that he's not the first Batman Hot Toys figure or Hot Toys figure in general to have something like this. I believe I have the DX19 Dark Knight Rises Bale Batman, who has the exact same thing going on, and I just personally don't like it. I prefer a much more secure dumbbell joint to kind of fasten and hold everything together as opposed to the magnets. I don't know what it is, but something about the magnets overall on the head and even the figure overall are a little suspect. So by nature, you could say that the head can definitely turn 360 degrees, incline in any kind of direction, and there's even a little bit of mobility on the neck piece itself. You can see right there, it kind of nudges up and down a little bit because there is a ball joint inside. But the reason for why that is because, of course, this brings us to pretty much our first batch of accessories that really favor the actual look of the character and the actual look of the figure, at least as far as giving you different poses, emotions, and gestures. Sticking with the head sculpt, and something that you may already have seen kind of be spoiled as I handled that head sculpt and kind of went on my little magnet rant, you'll notice that the faceplate, the neutral one, started to kind of come off a little bit as far as the mouth plate. And that's because Hot Toys does throw in 2 additional mouth plates. Both of them are pretty much open mouth, except one is kind of like in this mid-open kind of look to show off a little bit of the teeth, but then the other one is a full-on grimace to make him look like he's either in pain or he's fighting or he has that classic kind of, I'm about to beat your ass kind of look that he had in the Penguins Club. So pretty iconic look for the Robert Pattinson Batman, and it's still pretty well painted and sculpted. The teeth is actually a little bit of a standout, so it's pretty cool that it's not full on white. Teeth is very difficult to nail as far as figures, so it's cool to see that they didn't fully white it out. So they're pretty nice, pretty beautiful. Except one of them has a problem that I really want to save for later, as far as my a part 2 to that magnet rant that I had. But before I can do that, we of course need to tackle the alternate unmasked Robert Pattinson head, complete with eye makeup. And this is by default how he comes out of the box. You have, of course, the likeness to Robert Pattinson. Could have been a little better around the eyebrow area. It's not, again, kind of similar to that of the cowl. It's pretty much 90 to 95% there, but the likeness, I can tell who it is. It's Robert Pattinson. He's got, of course, the moody look, the eye makeup, the chiseled chin, a little bit of that dimple on the chin area around the jaw, and then, of course, even a little bit of added stubble to kind of be sculpted into the chin area to make it look like he hasn't shaved in a while. But as far as likeness, there is just a little something kind of off, just a little bit. And that's where that 5 to 10% leaves it a little lacking. But this is how he came by default, and you'll notice that he has the combed, very straight hair, kind of how he looks like in the funeral scene. But more often than not, he didn't really have that sort of hair. And that's because Hot Toys allows you to remove that hair piece via, again, a magnet. And when you remove it, you can actually swap it for an alternate messy, or as they call it, the helmet hair, to make it look like he just unmasked himself. And when you do so, this back hair piece does come off, and you can then have it be so that you hold all the pieces together, kind of replace it, and you have now a messy-haired Robert Pattinson, which in my opinion is a much better look, because when he had the eye makeup, he had the messed up hair. When he had the combed hair, he didn't really have the eye makeup. He was at the funeral scene. So this is my preferred unmasked look. And whenever you do want to swap out the heads, all you have to do, of course, is remove the neck piece off the ball joint, pop this one on along with the collar piece right here to make it look like it's all flush with the rest of the suit. Except, I don't know what's going on right here, but it's kind of a bitch to get the heads to be swapped properly. This head is very easy to put on because that's obviously the default head. The unmasked head, there's something happening with the hairpiece and the neck that makes it very, very difficult to put on with this neck piece. If you put him on just like this, he fits in there no problem. It's a very easy swap. But when you have to include this extra layer to, again, make it seem like he still has the collar piece right underneath, it's very difficult. It's kind of so much of a tight fit that more often than not, the ball joint does not get caught inside of the neck piece. So it's a bit of a struggle. You do have to be extra careful. Otherwise, you come at the risk of breaking something, whether it be in the neck piece, whether it be on the head sculpt. And to me, one of the biggest scares that I have is breaking any of these hair edges or hair pieces here towards the ends because of how delicate and frail they can kind of feel at times, despite this being my favorite hair piece. And I definitely don't want that to happen because this hair piece right here, the helmet one, is probably the one that does the best job of holding this back hair piece. And the reason for why that is because whenever I use the combed one, it doesn't really hold the back piece in place. And the reason for why that is because I don't know what's going on with the magnets on my unit. But this one had the magnet piece, the rectangular magnet piece, placed in there with probably the weakest super glue I've ever seen. And this isn't the first time that Hot Toys has kind of screwed me over in the past few months because there was another Hot Toys figure that used very subpar adhesive to hold Velcro pieces together, and I had to hit up Sideshow, and lo and behold, Sideshow had replacement parts at the ready for that specific figure. I'll have to see if I get around to actually delivering on that review, and I'll go on that rant when I get to that video eventually. But this is the second time something like this has happened, where the adhesive is just so loose that the magnet is actually right there. The magnets are so strong, a kudos, I guess a compliment to the magnets that they utilized. It's so strong that it peeled off the adhesive, and because of that, this piece is loose whenever I put it on the alternate unmasked head that it never feels properly, never feels properly secure. So it's cool that it gives me easy access to the eyeball rolling system, which is implemented on both the unmasked head and the cowled head, with, of course, the tool that helps you be able to do that. Personally, I feel like using my fingers is a little easier than utilizing that tool. That tool is a little too finagly that I feel like I have a firmer control if I just use the tip of my finger to be able to move the eyes. So overall, a pretty exceptional job of getting the eyes to actually move in either direction, and the detail behind the eyes is immaculate. They have that Pattinson green, they have the little bit of red around the edges to make it look very lifelike. But I just wish that it came with a much more secure hairpiece, and this combed hair, again, does a terrible job of holding him in place. Ironically, the messy hair, I don't know if it's because of the way that these tabs are sculpted, but it does a much better job of holding that hairpiece intact. And this, combined with my rant of how the magnet inside of that neck piece and that cowl may be a little askew, leads me to believe that the magnets are just kind of screwed up all over the place with these heads. And it's kind of making me wonder if whether or not I should hit up Sideshow to see if maybe they could send me out a replacement alternate head and cowl head to see if maybe that will change things up and fix things. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if that's something that I should make a move on. But at least one headpiece that I don't have to worry about with magnets is, of course, the empty cowl piece. So, of course, with an alternate head, you have to have a natural head sculpt, unfilled cowl, empty cowl, so that, it's for display purposes. It's modeled pretty identical to that of the one that he's actually sporting on right now, but of course it's empty, and it's actually kind of conjoined with the neck piece. But overall, pretty impressive. Still has a little bit of that weathering that I'm not the biggest fan of, but the sculpting is pretty nice. The only thing that I will objectively say is not a good look for Hot Toys is that you can actually see the seam of the two plastic pieces kind of sculpted and glued together. So again, I don't know if that's like a QC thing, but this is something that you typically expect out of any other company that you don't necessarily pay a pretty penny for. But for a premium company like Hot Toys, you generally pay to not see that. So I kind of wish that would have been on the inseam rather than on the outside, because when you can kind of see it from the outside, in my opinion, I know it sounds a little bougie, but it kind of ruins the experience, the immersion. And luckily, it's the empty cowl. You're not really going to be displaying it too much with them. But if you do, you are going to need alternate hands to be able to hold the cowl when you're displaying him with the alt head, which of course brings us to the alternate hands. Of course, with any Hot Toys, you're going to have alternate hands to be able to swap them out for different gestures, poses, and, dynamic kind of looks to the figure to make him look a little bit more alive. And by default, he comes with these neutral open hands, these relaxed open hands. But for posterity, I swapped them out for the fisted hands that you're seeing right now. So those are already two pairs he comes with included. He comes with two kind of cylindrical gripping hands, like he's holding onto something very cylindrically based, and we'll get to that when we cover the accessories. Then he comes with two, I guess you could argue, trigger hands, and you kind of get an idea of what those hands are going to be utilized. More on that later. Sadly, as far as symmetrical hands, that really about does it. He only comes with one additional asymmetrical hand. It's the only hand that comes in this mode, but they decided to only do it for the left hand, which is going to be like this slightly open, kind of reaching out, semi-clenched hand. So it's kind of somewhere between kind of gripping and fisted or open. And so it kind of has like this dynamic action pose, but it still kind of bothers my OCD a little bit that it's only on the left hand. They didn't include a right hand. So altogether, he comes with 9 hands. 9. Could have had the extra 10, but I don't know why Hot Toys decided to just throw in just the one for this. I don't know. It's a very bewildering decision that they decided to come up with, but there you have the hands. And so being able to swap them is pretty easy via the traditional Hot Toys joint there. And for the most part, this alone is pretty good for a decent price. But the thing is that Batman is just as good as his arsenal. and obviously these hands need to be utilized for specific gadgets. He comes with 2 adrenaline pins with the yellow accents, the little grip texture there towards the bottom, and I like the little hollowed out areas towards the front to make it look like an actual needle can come out of there, so a nice little touch. Flashlights, I believe this one's deployed to make it look like a flashlight can actually emit light from here, from this area right here with the little yellow accent. He really loves yellow and orange accents, I'm noticing. But once again, they repeat that little glossy texture right there with a little bit of weathering happening. And a similar case with this, I believe this is an actual flare. I don't want to say it's the flashlight. This is meant to be the flare that he's able to kind of deploy. Kind of wish that they would have added a little flare effect to attach to the top right here, but it is what it is. No, it's just wishful thinking. They didn't really have to do that, but it would have been nice. Nevertheless, you still have a textured grip right there with some more of that metal, airbrush metal kind of look to the top part and the yellow accent. A pair of functioning handcuffs, so you can actually open these guys up. Really well painted, and they even have a little bit of a textured grip there in the middle. And in the middle, there's an actual functioning kind of hinge to be able to fold them. Of course, do be careful though, because once you get to like that area right there, they can actually feel like they can break if you try to flex them or push them a little forward or a little bit more farther than that. So do be careful when kind of moving them about, but they technically are articulated in the middle joint right there to put it in a variety of different stances and poses. It makes me wonder if they knew that they weren't going to make a Riddler figure, but they are aware that there's third-party figures out there for the Riddler, so you can kind of utilize this on that guy. So just kind of food for thought. 2 of his retractable grapple guns that come out of his forearms, and it looks like they decided to take a page out of Ace Age Figuarts by having the elongated part towards the end be hollowed out or cut in half with 3 pegs that go into each respective gauntlet. So you can actually go into each gauntlet, remove the retracted or non-deployed grapple gun piece or plate, remove it, and swap it out for this one. And working in tandem with the grapple or trigger hands that you can then swap, you can then fit the grapple gun into those hands and make it look like he's about to take off with the grapple gun. So an interesting little touch, and they're both edged out and weathered. They even have a little bit of chipping going on with the paint jobs and the orange accents. And then, of course, a grapple gun is only as good as the actual grapples themselves. And Hot Toys also threw them in. You have a retracted one, a very short one right there, and then an elongated one with the wire. Careful with said wire because it is a little on the delicate side. It's made out of metal, but it's made out of that paperclip kind of metal where you can easily bend it and break it in half, but both can fit into the muzzles of each grapple gun very well, very snugly, if you will. And then we get to 2 of my favorite gadgets or accessories thrown in with the Hot Toys set. Overall, quite honestly, that's including the ones that we're about to get to. One of them is the iconic Riddler card from the beginning of the movie, included with this green envelope. You have the Batman lettering there on the front, and on the inside is the card itself from the movie, completely decked out and stylized just like it is, but completely accurate with the little owl there on the front, the Halloween motif. And then you have the 2 riddles on the inside, the one from the actual card company, as well as the one that is badly written by the Riddler himself. What does a liar do when he's dead? And to me, out of all the little details, I love all of these little stuff, but to me, what really stands out to me is the barcode on the back from the actual card company. I don't know what it is, but minuscule details like that really please me. And it's cool to see that the card itself can easily fit into the envelope inside. A nice little touch, and it's so cute. Look at this thing. But then you get some premium quality accessories with these extra bat symbols from his chest. These are the ones, of course, modeled after the one that he already has on his chest, only this time you have 2 variants. One that is pretty much clinched like it's mid action or being folded up by his hands, and then the other one that's pretty straight up like this, or kind of straightened out at the wings on the center portion here to make it look like the wings are flat, for when he uses it as a pretty much like a glorified letter opener, pretty much. And they're stylized, painted, just like the one on his chest, complete with weathering and chipping on the wings, the orange accents, and they are made out of die-cast metal, so you got that extra heft, that extra premium quality. But you're probably wondering, why did they decide to throw in these extra bat symbols if he's already got one on his chest? That's because you can actually use the utility tool that Hot Toys always throws in to be able to move the eyes and get some other gadgets and accessories and things off of his person. and you could use it for the same exact method to remove the chest symbol from his chest plate. It's magnetized, so all you have to do is give it a firm press, and you can remove it to then pose him with one of these other variants in his hand and kind of complete the illusion. So it's a nice welcome touch that Hot Toys decided to toss in. Now, speaking of that chest plate, it's a little on the scary side, but technically speaking, the bat symbol is not the only thing that could be removed. The chest plate itself could be removed to then grant you easier access to the default cape, so that then you can swap it for this other alternate cape. And it's pretty much stylized and made out of the same material. It even has a little bit more of that dirt motif here towards the end. And again, I'm kind of a little on the negative side when it comes to this material and the design. To have it look like it's weathered, I would have liked a much cleaner look for it. But the specific function for this cape is simply to just give him a little bit of extra dynamic quality to the cape, because this time it's a little bit on the longer side, it's a little bit wider. It even has a couple of magnets to kind of stitch it and hold it together here in the middle. But when you detach the magnets, this figure's all about the magnets, Jesus. But when you stretch it out and kind of detach the magnets, you'll notice that it's got a wider wingspan, and you're missing a little bit of the kind of Batman-like quality trimmings towards the end. And that's because, unlike the default cape, this guy comes with 5 wires instead of just 3. Instead of just the ones on the left, right, and the middle, you have 2 additional ones in between. And that's because this is the cape that you pretty much want to style him with should you want to pose him like he's mid-zipping up on the grapple, or he's kind of flying through the air, or specifically, the cape is blowing in the wind when he's riding the Bat Cycle, which is sold separately by Hot Toys. So that's an added nice little touch. Personally, the function, or the method rather, to swap the cape is a little on the scary side, because the Velcro that is holding that chest plate together is actually really strong, to the point where I felt like I was either going to rip something apart, or I was just doing it wrong. But I followed the instructions. I even looked up a couple of videos, and all of them simply just say remove the chest plate. Just make sure that the little pieces to make it look like it has straps towards the top go underneath the collar piece. And when you do that, you can then kind of gain access to additional Velcro pads that are holding the cape in place. Remove that, of course, remove the head to kind of get out of the way and make it convenient for yourself, and swap it out for this alternate cape. So cool to see that they tossed that in, but at the same time, I personally feel like I'm going to go with this cape a little bit more frequently, especially since I opted to not really get the Bat Cycle, because I just personally didn't really see like it was worth it for me. However, if you're looking for an extra touch of aerodynamicy, I recommend the wingsuit, which brings us to now the completion, or the end, of all the standard edition accessories that are tossed in with the Hot Toys Batman figure. But that's not the version that I got. Of course, because I'm holding the wingsuit, this means that I actually opted for the deluxe edition, which includes a couple of added little touches. Some of them are pretty welcome, some of them a little indifferent too, and there's even an extra one that I find to be a little controversial, and I'm a little surprised that more people are not throwing a bit of a fuss over, personally. But that accessory is not going to be the wingsuit. The wingsuit here is, of course, the one that he sports when he's escaping the police tower from the rooftop after decking out Gordon, and you can see right here that it's made out of a similar material to that of the cape, except I don't know if it's just me, but the quality feels just a little better on the wingsuit than it does on the trash baggy kind of cape. To me, there's something about this wingsuit that I don't know what it is, but it just feels like it's going to last me a little longer than either the alternate cape or the default cape. That's not to say that it's nothing terribly premium. It's still made out of this kind of nylon kind of feel to the quality of the material, but it feels like it has an extra layer stitched onto it that's going to feel a little bit more on the durable side. But apart from that, it still has a little bit of that flying squirrel motif going on, and despite all of the little intricacies of the zippers, the orange accented straps to kind of make it a little bit easier on yourself to open up those zippers, the actual method to put it on is actually quite simple. You'll notice that on the left, or at least to my left, you have one big ass zipper that starts from the top and goes all the way to the bottom. And all you have to really do is undo that zipper, take the figure, and pop him in. And I figured that there was going to be some more intricacies to that process, but according to the instructions, that's really about it. You just gotta wrap it around him, put the arms inside of the sleeves, and you're done. I'm suspecting that these extra straps right here are either for looks, just to make it look like a actual intricate wingsuit, or to just make it a little bit easier on the user to pull it and kind of fit it in place, specifically the sleeves, because when you pull on these sleeves, it makes it a little bit easier to wrap around the gauntlets, because he is going to be a bit of a bulky boy. But once you have it on, he pretty much looks like he does at the top of the tower during that scene. Nothing really more than that. He does have some extra pouches to fit some accessories here on the front, kangaroo style, but the added zippers here on the sleeves, they're just there for really convenience. They're not for necessity. So don't fret if you really don't end up using any of them. Specifically the chest one here, I personally don't know exactly why it's there, but still, it's one of those extra additional accessories that definitively come with the deluxe version of a Hot Toys figure that I feel like a lot of collectors will kind of give and take. What a lot of those collectors will happily take, however, will be the Sticky Bomb gun, which is unfortunately locked behind exclusivity with the deluxe edition. This is the one that I personally feel a lot more people should be, I guess you would say, outraged for, because this is kind of a staple gun accessory, or just overall gadget, for this interpretation of the Batman. He utilized it quite frequently throughout the movie, and so it's a welcome addition to the entire set. You even have some functionality happening with the canister inside that can be removed, holding the sticky bombs in place, and it even comes with an individual sticky bomb to either put on the muzzle of the gun itself, or just kind of have him hold it in his hand somehow. And so it's decently painted, sculpted, and etched out, but I personally don't understand why this specific gadget was thrown in with the deluxe edition and not the standard edition. I would make the argument that this should have been included with all versions of the Pattinson Batman Hot Toys figure. Why? Because every version of the Pattinson Batman figure comes with the holster that I touched upon earlier before. But for those who only got the standard edition, they're going to have an empty holster. And the holster itself even functions. You have a little bit of Velcro holding the two flaps in place, and when you open it up, you can happily fit the sticky bomb gun inside, just like you can do with the rest of the accessories to make it look like they're on his person and he's fully equipped, ready to go. But the people who didn't get the deluxe edition will have an empty holster, just feeling kind of vacant. So a little disappointing that Hot Toys made this decision. It almost kind of feels like the inversion of including the semi-clenched hand only on the left and not including a right one and keeping it asymmetrical. It's little design choices like that Hot Toys kind of brought this specific set, or even this release, down a couple notches for me. Now, as far as actual functional deluxe accessories, they kind of end a little bit there, but you still have some other additions tossed in to make things a little bit more lavish, specifically for collectors that like to really deck out their displays. Both the standard and deluxe edition come with, of course, the rectangular display base along with the crotch grabber, and it's pretty much going to look more or less like this, complete with the Batman name plaque there on the front with the symbol etched out in the chrome paint, and then the Batman right underneath there. But you'll notice that mine might look a little different than the standard edition because it's sticking out like this metallic kind of look to the top of the base itself. And the reason for that is because the deluxe edition comes with what they claim to be interchangeable cards, graphic cards, to put on top of the base itself. The standard edition technically comes with this red and black one, which I personally find to be my favorite, obviously because of the design, the lenticular look to the reflectiveness of the red, and then of course the clash of colors, along with the Batman logo there at the bottom. But you also get kind of like this fiery one, the fire effect from, I believe, the Batmobile chase scene. And then this metallic one that's supposed to factor in with additional pieces for display purposes. However, the reason for why I use quotes, air quotes, around the term interchangeable is because it feels like this one is actually grafted onto the base via an adhesive. And technically, you can also do the same thing with these guys, but I'm scared to do that, which is why I left them alone. That's why they still have a little bit of the reflective cellophane on top. So if anything, I'll probably just remove the crotch grabber and use it to hold these in place for display purposes, but I personally don't feel comfortable kind of messing around with that. But what I was more than happy to mess around with were the additional pieces for a complete display diorama that Hot Toys decided to throw in with the deluxe edition. It's actually one of the few things I was looking forward towards the most, more so than the wingsuit or the sticky bomb gun when it came to pre-ordering said deluxe edition over the standard. You'll notice that one of those pieces right here is one modeled after the Iceberg Lounge club scene for when Batman is fighting those goons, complete with the staircase pieces right here on the side, the middle part right here with the metallic plating here with the rivets, the red accents underneath to kind of emulate that look from that scene, and even a guardrail to have here on the side. And what's kind of cool is that these pieces right here, including the one with the guardrail, are swappable, so you can have the guardrail on the left or on the right, depending on your choosing. I simply just modeled it after the promo shots right here. And you'll notice that you also have the slot to put in the crotch grabber, and on the side, you have a USB-C plug and on and off switch. And that's because when connected to USB-C power, flipping that switch will light up the red accents underneath each step, and that is really, really cool. It's actually one of my first Hot Toys figures to deck out a full-on light-up display, and it's a welcome touch, and it's actually pretty quality as far as how, how many lumens they put behind those bulbs. So it's pretty cool to see that they went out a little bit extra on the little touches here for this display, and it gets both better, but with one little caveat that just gets under my skin. And that's going to be this additional piece modeled after the ledge that he hops off from the top of the police tower. This is supposed to work kind of like a companion piece, if you will, to the wingsuit. So you can display him on top and perch him on top, or without the wingsuit, just make him look all badass. Wonderfully painted and sculpted to make it look like legitimate brick and rock, complete with this, it almost kind of looks like a gargoyle, but this very authentic design to old-time Gotham, and it just looks beautiful. I love this look. If only it could be extended towards the bottom here. But technically, there is a form of extension happening with this display base, because when you rotate it, you'll notice that you have more of these red accents to make it look like it's elongating the illusion of the club scene from this base. And then you'll notice you have these slots right here, and that's because the tab that I called out earlier right here at the bottom can actually go into one of those slots. Specifically, the bottom one, you could technically, I think, mix and match it, but I feel like the more proper way to do it is to go towards the bottom one, and then you have this full-on display, as you can see right here. Very uniformal here towards the front to make it look like it's 3 steps from the club scene, and then when you rotate it around, you have the police rooftop scene. So this is awesome. You have so many options, and it gets even better because technically you can use these 2 pieces to work with the regular display, the rectangular display over there, by removing the nameplate from the front. You could easily just pop it off and then kind of mix and match, and it gives you options. So you can kind of sandwich it in the middle, flip it around, do different varieties, especially with these rail pieces that you can then swap. You get variety. You get all these different things to play around with display-wise should you have gone with the deluxe edition. The only little detail that just gets a little bit under my skin, actually technically two little details. One of them is that you'll notice that you technically have 3 rows of these accents, and I was kind of gushing about the USB-C being able to light up these 2 towards the bottom. Unfortunately, it does not light up the top one. So when you connect this to USB-C power, you'll then notice that only 2 of those rows will light up. The top one will not light up. And so it kind of bugs my OCD slightly to see that when you do go for that flashier look to the overall base, you're going to be left with one row looking like it's blown out and it doesn't function. But that's because it doesn't have any kind of USB-C power being channeled through to that extra base. There's no additional plug. There's no additional switch. And that tab is simply just a plastic tab to hold everything together. There's no channeling of any kind of power. Granted, that would have been a little extra on Hot Toys' part, but at the same time, how much can it really cost to do that? Let alone throw in an extra USB-C cable to be included in an entire set. That's my only other little gripe, my only other bougie nitpick is the fact that you do not have a USB-C plug or break included. You kind of have to find your own. I understand that USB-C is one of the most common cables out there. All you have to do is just look for your phone charger and you practically have one already to utilize here. Or if you own a video game console, just use the one for your controller. That's pretty much what I did. But here's the thing. I have to speak for the people here, or at least attempt to, because I worked in retail. I worked at a retail electronics store that uses blue and yellow for their color scheme. Make that with what you will. And let's just say that during my time there, I found out how much it really costs these companies to make USB-C cables. And trust me, when you find out, I'm not going to say it here, but you can simply just do a Google search. And when you find out, you'll know exactly why it is that I'm ranting a little bit here, because it really shouldn't cost a mega company like Hot Toys, especially located in China, out of all places, which is where the majority of these cables even come from for suppliers. It really shouldn't cost that much to make a cable and just toss it in there. I'm just saying. However, if you don't want to really bother yourself with any of the fancy stuff with the displays, the interchangeability, then Hot Toys still threw in this kind of lenticular 3D display stand to be able to be tossed up behind the standard rectangular display. And even though I have stated in the past that I personally don't like these kind of things, and this one's already showing a few signs of warping after kind of setting it up from behind with the little cardboard stands. The actual look of the lenticular 3D effect combined with the fire effect, kind of taken from the Batmobile chase, along with the logo here towards the top, I gotta be honest, this is actually one of the nicer looking ones, so kudos for them to also include that there, but again, locked behind the deluxe edition, so for those who kind of just got the standard edition, that is not included, so that is a little unfortunate. I feel like out of all the things here versus the light up display and the 3D lenticular one, that's another one along with the sticky bomb that they could have probably afforded to throw in with the standard edition. But as you can see here, this is pretty much everything that is included with the deluxe edition. And by itself, looking at the entire big picture of it all, this is a very, very welcome set. But this is Batman we're talking about. I personally find it very difficult for me to not spare any expense when talking about action figures pertaining to one of my favorite superheroes, let alone from a prestigious company like Hot Toys. So I didn't just get the standard edition, I didn't just get the deluxe edition. I took it just one step further and got the one that comes with the ultimate piece de resistance. And ooh baby, is it in fact a bitchin' piece? Yes, it is in fact the bat signal, as you can clearly see right here, modeled in a true 1/6 scale format. It is girthy, it is huge, and it's actually quite deceptive of how it managed to fit inside of the box. And you can see right here that it's massive as far as the grand scale of things, being paired right next to the Batman. And though it's not exactly die-cast metal, as one would like to believe, but at the same time, you should probably be thankful for that, because then that would have skyrocketed the price even further than I would have already paid for this specific set, which pretty much is the tier right above deluxe. So you have the standard, you have the deluxe, then you have the deluxe with the bat signal. In other words, you have a problem, like myself, where you just don't know when to quit. But you know that with the version of Pattinson Batman with such a unique bat signal, I just had to have it. The option was there, and so I opted to get the version with the bat signal that does in fact still look amazing despite not being die-cast metal. Because if you're going to be pulling back on the die-cast metal and just delivering it on a very durable and still pretty satisfying quality plastic, as it's pretty much making up the entirety of the bat signal, you gotta at least provide the illusion that you are delivering a metal-looking bat signal or a metal-looking piece such as this. And frankly, that's what I really do see. In all honesty, the actual level of quality behind the rustic look of the metal with the airbrushing, they really did go all out on this accessory. This is honestly, next to, again, those die-cast bat symbol pieces, the Riddler card, and then a couple of other functional things that are going on with the bat suit itself, this is probably my favorite thing out of the entire set. I know that it's probably the most exclusive thing because it's literally the reason for why there's a whole another tier of sets for this guy, for the Hot Toys Batman, but Yeah, they made it worth it. They made that extra bump up in price worth it with the detail of the rivets, the bolts, all the little intricacies, the pipes, like I said, the rustic look of making it seem like he actually tore off the metal tore off the metal of these vents, which still look nice by themselves separately as they were initially before he managed to practically mutilate them to then form the bat signal there on the front. And it looks legitimately just like it did in the movie itself. Now, as far as actual functionality and what you can really do with the bat signal outside of the obvious, would be that technically speaking, you do have little functional bits here and there. You have these kind of levers on the side that you can technically move forwards and backwards, both on the right and on the left. One is placed a little lower than the other, but they can technically function if you ever want to pose him or some kind of third-party Gordon out there, maybe Catwoman, etc. You can then have them function with and pose them with those figures, like they're making it look like they're turning the signal on. You technically have these valves that can turn, but they do have to be assembled right out of the package, but by default, that means that they can in fact turn. So in case you ever kind of want to function them somehow, there is that. And then the bat signal itself can technically move up and down upon its very hefty base. Again, despite not being actual die-cast, it still feels pretty heavy in hand. It even has a couple of little felt pads here on the bottom to make sure that it's not scratching any of the surfaces that you manage to place it on, whether it be on your detolf or on any other kind of shelf. And as you can see right there, it came default in this position, but technically you can move it past this degree from this angle basically all the way down to where what they call the safety bar down here at the bottom is placed. That's as far as it goes, and that's pretty much your indicator to make sure that it doesn't go any further than that. A little bit of a nitpick would be that I wish that the signal can kind of aim forward to look like the Schumacher bat signal, but at least the way that it is, especially angled in this direction, is pretty much how it was in the movie, and ideally that's how you would want it to be positioned, especially when you take into account the main function behind a bat signal such as this. You guessed it, it does in fact light up. And to put it in a very mild way, holy shit, Batman, this thing is actually bright. This thing actually lights the hell up. Of course, it's powered by USB-C cable or USB-C power via a little plug that's on the side, and next to it you have the switch. When you flip that on, make sure you're not aiming it towards yourself, towards your face, or anybody else's eyes, because the lumens behind this bulb, they spared no expense. It actually does in fact light up. And though it does start to get a little bit blurry the higher that you aim it at, you still can make out very vividly the bat symbol on any kind of surface. I pointed it in my walls inside of my room here, inside of the light box, and ironically I feel like the closer it is to a surface, let's say for example one of these walls right here for the light box, it does look a little bit more faint. It's actually when it goes, it's so powerful that the farther the light is, the more clearer the bat signal will truly become. And you could practically use this damn thing as a goddamn nightlight if you ever wish to do so. And that's just how great this bat signal is. And I can only imagine how great it will look like, not only up on the shelf in a detolf case posed right next to the Batman figure itself, but also maybe if there were some modders out there that can find a way to safely and without any damage coming to the signal itself, remove this piece right here, which does feel like it can be removed. Whenever I kind of take a slight little grip on the grid itself here with the vents, it feels like it may be detached, but the instructions don't advise that, so I'm gonna abstain from doing that. But if anybody wants to take the chance, the risk rather, the gamble, removing this piece and maybe putting on some kind of gel, specifically a red gel, to kind of keep with the motif of the red and the black and red themes that had going on with that movie, and maybe see how the light does with gels to kind of give it a much more theatrical look. I can only imagine what certain customizers and modders out there can really do with a piece like this. But frankly, even if I don't do that, just looking at this thing and kind of, like I said, moving it inwards and outwards, switching it on, taking a very closer look at the paint jobs, even if it's not die cast, it creates that illusion, and it has enough quality and heft behind it that, though it's not necessary for any avid collector, I am personally glad that I opted for the bat signal version, because this is quite honestly a showstopper. And so finally, with the bat signal, that pretty much concludes everything that was included in the set that I picked up. And I understand that it's a lot. And I understand it's the extra mile that I decided to personally take. But that's just it, is that whether you were to take this extreme measure of collecting everything, the highest coup de grace version of this set, or if you were to go with the bare bones standard set that just comes with the figure, the accessories that you have here down at the bottom with the cowl, the alternate head, the extra hands, some of the gadgets, and then just the figure itself, I would argue you're still in very capable hands of getting a very complete, worthwhile package in the 1/6 scale format to commemorate this version of the Robert Pattinson Batman, at least until InArt comes out, because that's where I do have to present a form of argument for there to still be improvements to be made, because this guy's not necessarily perfect. I simply just got the deluxe edition because I'm a bougie son of a bitch. I really do have to go the extra mile when it comes to my boy Batman or even Spider-Man, so that's why I kind of settled for the deluxe edition to get the extra base, because there were some worthwhile qualities in there, especially with the light-up features of this version of the base, the bat signal itself, the details, etc., the added wingsuit. It's one of those what the hell moments for me back when I pre-ordered in early 2022. But that's not going to abscond the figure from some hefty criticisms from me, whether it be some of the funkiness with the magnets or my personal qualms with the weathering and the dirt on the cape and some of the stylings behind the suit that, again, could have been a little better improved, and still lead me down the path of wondering what exactly InArt has cooking up their sleeve, or however the saying goes. And since that happens to be the case, and this video is long enough already, let's cut to the rating. It's going to be a very, very high and very enthusiastic and solid 8 out of 10. It's not necessarily the most perfect Batman figure. I would even argue that maybe if I had gone for just the standard deluxe edition or the standard edition, maybe I would reconsider making the rating a little higher considering the value package, because like I said, the wingsuit is kind of give and take. The OCD triggering nitpick that I have with the non-light up features of that base is something that does kind of still stick in my brain, but outside of that, it's still, like I said, a complete package that if you were to go with this version, you'll still get your money's worth, but I wouldn't necessarily blame you if you were to simply go for the secondary market and get the standard edition to save a few bucks, or if you happen to be just like with other collectors in the 1/6 scale market and are simply just waiting for InArt. It will hopefully happen within the next couple of months, and yes, because I have a problem, I do happen to have that bad boy on pre-order as well. Let's see how things go in terms of finances, in terms of personal life dealings kind of, happening, and see if maybe I can pick that boy up as well and maybe deliver on a comparison video to see exactly if InArt is the competitor we're all hoping for them to be, to give Hot Toys a little bit of competition and a run for their money so that in the end 1/6 scale collectors can win. But I also want to hear from the folks that aren't 1/6 scale collectors, being Batman fans, and if you were a fan of the Robert Pattinson Batman movie from 2022, does the Hot Toys version here kind of persuade you in any kind of direction to pick him up, even if it happens to be in the secondary market for an extra little premium, whether it be through eBay, Mercari, etc., to go for this bombastic Bat Signal edition, or simply just go for the standard edition? It's your call. Whatever the case may be, let me know down in the comment section below. And while you're down there, if you enjoyed this very, very, very long video, first of all, I apologize, and thank you for sticking around all the way to the very end. And I would greatly appreciate it if you hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed it. If not, hit the thumbs down all the same. And as always, stay humble. I'll see you guys later. Peace.